That's a really nice airport.
All right, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Cameron, thank you for being here today. Appreciate everybody showing up who's here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I don't think I said what my name is, so my name is Charity. I'm the current president of Chapter 83, so welcome. Glad you made the trip over. So just a couple housekeeping things. I know you already signed in, so just if you've not, is this your first time here at this airport?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you need to step out, there are bathrooms right out here to the right down the hallway, so if you need to get up at any time, feel free to do so. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt and ask. There will be points where I'll specifically give you a chance to ask questions, but don't be afraid to raise your hand or just shout something out if you need clarification on anything or anything like that. And then if you need more coffee or a donut or anything like that, they are there for you. So, we're going to do a quick little introduction. So I said who I was. We do have several of our chapter members here today. So we'll just, if everybody just wants to say real quick, what your name is and what your role is here in the chapter.
So my name is Blake Bixwood. I'm the Young Eagles coordinator for the chapter. I'm currently going to be going for my life support pilot's license, so I'm working towards that.
And if you guys just want to go over.
I'm Alice Ramsey. I am the treasurer. Not that we have a lot of money, but we try. I've been a member here, 4 or 5 years, and got my license at age 60, so it's doable. Flying RV-12.
Yep.
Yeah, we co-own, well, she owns it, I work on it, the RV-12. I'm the vice president, past president, and the donut guy. Like I said, I've had my license since 1977. 1900s. I said we had Cherokee before that. Now we got the 12, which is kind of like a second one. It's easy. Fine.
Yeah, I'm Mark. I said I would have find Bloomington on my bag. Actually, I bought Rick's Cherokee when he had sold it. I actually just sold it this weekend. I'm actually building my own plane. That's one of the things that EAA started with, for people that build their own units there. So that's being a chapter member really helps. Dale was just here. He's built 2 different airplanes, so he's a great resource to ask questions.
I'm Tom Milligan, past chapter president.
President Emeritus.
Yes, whatever. Thank you. So I fly a Sabria off a grass strip where I live at Beaman.
So we've got all sorts of experience sitting in the room today. So what is the goal? So the reason that we scheduled this event, what we really wanted to do is just kind of walk people through the process of becoming a pilot, what it looks like to go through training, what kind of options you have for training, for aircraft, things to be aware of, things like that. So I really just want to give people a chance to ask questions and really just kind of inspire you that this is something that you want to do, you can do it. Research. So like I said, it's not something that you want to jump into without having any information on, but as long as you do your research and know what you're getting into, it is absolutely doable. So there's an itinerary in your folder. We'll try to stick to that as much as possible. I will say there's a little bit more information that we decided to add, so we might be off a little bit. We'll give you a chance to take a break just because there's a lot of information that we're going to talk about, and it's just kind of a lot to absorb. So we'll give you that chance, but we're going to talk about the EAA a little bit. We'll talk about our chapter. We're going to talk a little bit about what got us into aviation. And like I said, we'll talk about what it takes to become a pilot, some things that you have to be aware of for yourself. We'll talk about the training, aircraft, and then we'll get you scheduled with the pilot so that you have a flight to look forward to. All right, so what is the EAA? So Experimental Aircraft Association. So this is a worldwide organization. There are hundreds of thousands of members in the EAA around the world. So it's a really big community of people. And really the purpose of the EAA is it's a community of passionate aviation enthusiasts who promote and support recreational flying. So their whole purpose is to get people into aviation, give them the tools and the resources that they need. Some of the things that the EAA does to serve the community is for one thing, we have local chapters, so we're chapter 83. I'm pretty sure Bloomington has a chapter, so if you've not looked into that, that's something that you can do. But there are over 900 chapters currently. So getting involved in a local chapter can be really informative, helps just to talk to other people in aviation, get some of their information and experience. The EAA also does a lot of different events and activities. So they're located in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. That's where their headquarters are. They've got a museum there. They've got a lodge there where they do trainings for leadership. They do a lot of things. So if you know anybody, like if you've got kids, nieces, nephews, cousins that are interested and they're under 18, there's a lot of things for. There's a place for them in the EAA community as well. And then the EAA, like their website, if you've not been on their website before, they have tons of resources, information, webinars that you can watch for free. So tons of information at your fingertips. Some of that stuff you don't even have to be a member to access, and then some stuff you do have to be a member of. They also, for members, they do a sport aviation magazine that I think it's once a month that it comes out, that's full of information. And the biggest thing that I think I heard Blake talking to you about was Air Venture. So Air Venture is like the world's largest air show, trade show, aviation event of the year. It's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that go every year. That's kind of what got us more fully started into aviation, was we went to that. We're like, oh, we can do this. Got connected with local chapter 83, and kind of gone from there. So great, if you get a chance to go. It is worth it. We go for the whole week. You don't have to do that, but you can go, you can camp. We do chapter camping, so we get to camp together. So it's a pretty cool experience. So definitely worth it. If you have any questions, obviously just ask us about that, because I think not all of us in the room, but a lot of us in the room have been there several times. So, and then Greg is going for the first time this year, so I'm super excited for him. And then we'll get Alice there Sunday. Mark, have you been before?
No, my
okay.
oldest daughter lives in Canada, so I'm a Sun and Fun person.
Oh, yeah, Sun and Fun. All right, so again, so the EAA's mission, they just really want to grow participation in aviation and get people connected. So anybody is welcome, even if you're a person who has no intention on getting a pilot certification, there's a place. So it's the members of the EAA come from all walks of life, all professions, all interests. So whatever it is that you are in, if you just like to watch planes, there's a place. If you want to be an airline pilot, there's a place. If you like the warbirds or the vintage or anything
And there's other chapters that have different focus, like there's
Yep.
vintage aircraft one out of Sky Cape,
Yep.
and that's for like 1970 and older, not for them to carry, and they're a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
There's an ultralight one up in Kingman, and they're a lot of fun, those are good guys. And
Yeah.
they've got a grass strip that they fly out of, so if that's what you want to do,
Yeah.
I mean, and you can be a member of multiple.
Yeah, you can be chapter 83, you can be vintage, you can be warbirds, you can be all
I'm
those
probably in
things.
12 of them.
There's certain of us that are junkies, and I'm in it.
So it's really just whatever you're interested in.
So
But
what
there's a
chapter
place
meeting are
for
we
it.
going to this Saturday?
Yeah. So there's just, and it's just a lot of fun. Like it's just people that just love getting together, talking about aviation, talking about other things. So. All right, so some of the other things that the EAA does is they do a lot of government advocacy. So they are really good about advocating for pilots and like people in aviation. So some of the things that they're currently working on is Mosaic, and that's something that we'll come back to. Have you heard of Mosaic before? Do you know anything? Okay, so we're going to talk quite a bit about that today. We'll get into it because it's going to make there's a lot of changes coming to like pilot certification and the difference between like private pilot and light sport and aircraft that's going to be available. So that's a pretty big piece of advocacy work that they've done. They also do a lot of advocacy about medical, so like there's different medical certificates that you have to get depending on what you want to do. So they really advocate for like pilots and their health and what should be precluded, what shouldn't be precluded, what makes somebody a safe pilot versus just someone that drives a car or something like that. And then there's a lot of talk right now about changing like aviation fuels and what we can use in the airplanes and things like that. So the EAA really does go to bat for us. They have like a whole like department that works closely with legislators and stuff like that. So they really do have our best interest in mind. So a little bit about us, Chapter 83. We've been around for quite some time. I think the initial chapter actually started like late 50s, early 60s.
I was probably there.
So, and then there was kind of a lapse. There's a little bit of inactivity, so they kind of were dormant for a while, and then they reestablished themselves and then chartered and bylaws and that kind of thing. So right now we have over 50 dues paying members. We have a really big aviation community around here. There's actually several hundred EAA members within like a 20-mile radius, but we have just over 50 that actually pay dues and are like actively participating in our chapter. And we just like to get together and do things. So earlier this year we had a movie night. We've got a couple that's part of our chapter who has a box hanger. They let us use their hanger for events. So we had a movie night. We set up a screen and chairs and had pizza and watched the movie together. We're actually going to have an open house and cookout next month. So if you want to come back for that, you're more than welcome. And that's really just a way to get together, get people interested in the community and the chapter. So we're going to do that. We're also going to have a pancake breakfast later this year. We try to do Young Eagle events at least 3 times a year. So we've had one so far. We'll have another one in June, and then we're looking at one in September. And then we're looking at doing a Young Eagle build workshop. So we have like programs where we can get youth together and like work on a part of a plane or something like that, just to teach them about aviation and give them some education. And then the last couple of years we've had a Halloween party and a Christmas party. And then something new this year will be like a Thanksgiving event. So we really just try to like have events throughout the year so that we can get together, socialize, that kind of thing. On top of those things, we also do fly-ins and fly-outs. So like tomorrow there's a group of us flying out to Columbus to have breakfast. So we try to do those kind of things too, where we actually get to fly and engage with each other that way. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about why learn to fly. We've got a video we're going to watch first, if we can get it to, see if it'll play. Jackie, I might need you. Oh, maybe there's just a delay.
It's the calming feeling. You just can't get that peaceful feeling on the ground. As soon as you take off, it's one of those things that your mind is on flying and is enjoying what you see and what God has brought to us.
I don't know, it's just like the thrill of slipping down a mountain or going around the adobes, chase dirt buggers, and have fun.
Freedom. You're your own boss, you're in control and not somebody else. And it just takes you to places that nobody else can go.
There's a romance to flight. We've been dreaming about it for millennia. There's got to be a reason to it.
Flying, being behind the controls of an aircraft, and knowing that you're the reason why this machine is flying is unlike anything. You're constantly challenging yourself and discovering your strengths and weaknesses. But at the end of the day, you get to hop out and say, yeah, I did that. I accomplished that.
Just go for it. Really, truly go for it. Aviation has been one of those things I've been around my entire life, and it's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
so just a little bit about me and why I fly. So I was the person that when I was a kid, I was just always kind of like drawn to planes. Every time I'd hear a plane, I was just like, airplane. I used to, as a kid, I would travel back and forth from like northern Illinois to like south central Illinois, and every time we'd go through like the O'Hare Midway, I'd always be like looking at the jets, hoping that one would go over. So I've always kind of had an interest in airplanes. And then when I was in high school, there's actually a book series I was reading. I don't remember what it was now, but there was like a character in it that could just like get in a plane and they could pretty much fly anything from like the small little two-seaters to like the big airliners. And I just thought, how cool would that be to jump in a plane and just go fly somewhere and just know what you're doing? That's kind of where the desire started. And then I kind of kept that in the back of my mind for a while. But it's probably never going to happen. I'll probably never get that opportunity. Didn't really know a whole lot about the aviation world. But it was just kind of always there, like, oh, that'd be really cool to get my pilot certificate. And then Blake has always been into aviation. So as we've been talking about like our future, like the things that we want to be able to do and things like that, we were talking about potentially getting our pilot certifications. And I went back and forth between like private and like sport. And we'll talk more a little bit about like the difference between those and the pros and cons. Then he found out about Oshkosh. He's the one that kind of got us like, hey, we should go here. We should do this. And I was like, sure, why not? Let's give it a shot. I have no idea what I'm jumping into, but let's do it. So we went, and it was amazing. Learned a ton of information. And AirVenture is one of those things where you will never, like in one trip, do everything, see everything. Like there's so much there. But there's so many resources there that you can really kind of focus like what you want to learn about. There's seminars every day. So we learned a lot of information. And one of the things that we learned was like, get involved with your local chapter. Like that will be a huge help to you. So we did that. We got back here like, okay, who's the local chapter? And we just kind of like showed up one day to one of so our chapter has weekly lunches on Fridays. We just showed up to lunch one day. We're like, we're just jumping in. We're gonna go for it.
2 years later, she's president.
Yeah. But we got involved. Like we were drawn in enough by Oshkosh that we did that. And I want to travel. Like I've always kind of wanted to travel the country and see all the things anyway. To do it by air is like a whole other experience that is just really exciting. So I want to do that. That's something that we want to do together. And then it's just fun to share aviation with others and talk to other people. So that's kind of how I got started. I'll talk more about my journey as we go through the presentation. Blake, did you want to talk about like why you're pursuing like sport or anything? So I have a private pilot certification.
So,
or you might have already, I don't know if you already talked.
probably a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just because I can't necessarily get a third class medical, and we'll go into that. So I decided to like sport, and then I was a little disappointed at first about like sport, and then I heard about Mosaic, and Mosaic is going to open up the number of lanes I can go to fly. So therefore, I don't really need anything more than I like sport for what we want to do. So it kind of works out, and it's going to save us money in the long run. And if we ever need instrument or anything, she's a private pilot. She can get hers graded.
And we'll come back to that because there is a reason why I got my private and not my light sport. And then I meant to say also, like at Oshkosh, they have like different workshops that you can do where you can do different activities. We did like a riveting workshop where we learned that I'm not very good at riveting, but if you want to take a look at that. So there's just like, they've got like fabric workshops where you can learn different stages of building and stuff like that. So it's really like the aviator's dream. Like if you have any interest in aviation at all go to AirVenture. All the vendors are there, and you can just, I don't know if anybody else wants to look if you want to pass it, kind of pass it around, but there's so much to do. Tom's like. All right, so flight opportunities. So as we're going through the presentation, something for you to keep in mind is what you think you might want to do, because you could be like you can fly a little two-seater, you can be an airline pilot, whatever it is that you're interested in, kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we're going through the information, so you can kind of pull out what's going to be helpful to you. So with airplanes, there's light sport airplanes, there's factory-built airplanes, there's the vintage airplanes, home-built. How are you? Good. So I think I heard Blake telling you earlier, like we do plan to build. There's several in here who have built or are building an airplane, so that's an option. There are reasons to do that. There are benefits to building your own plane. Then there's the aerobatic planes. There's ultralights, soaring, seaplanes. That's kind of like another bucket list item for me if I can get my seaplane rating, because I love the water also. So if I can fly and land on the water, I get the best of both worlds. And then rotorcraft. those kind of things. So any questions so far on anything? Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about requirements for pilots. So this is kind of like the nuts and bolts of things that you need to keep in mind depending on what pilot certification you want to get. So we're going to start with private pilot. So you have to start with at least some kind of medical certificate. And we'll go into more detail on that here in a minute, but you have to be at least 17 years of age. Obviously, since you're here, you are older than 18, so we don't have to worry about you being the appropriate age. But you can also, like, if you have people that you know, you can always let them know. People can start training a lot younger. You just can't solo until you're 16, and you can't get your certificate until you're 17. You have to be able to read, write, and speak English. There is a knowledge exam that you'll have to take. It's a written exam. There's also the practical exam, so that's also if you hear people talk about their check ride, that's what that is. The check ride is two parts. There's like an oral portion and a flight portion, and you can't do that with your instructor. That's something that you have to do with a separate designated instructor, examiner that can sign you off on that. And then to get your private pilot certificate, you have to get at least 40 hours logged. The average is actually quite a bit higher than that, but per the FAA, you have to have at least 40 hours in the plane before you can do your check ride and get your certificate. So light sport, a lot of the same things. The main difference is the hours, so you still have to, in the medical. So for a light sport, you do not have to get any kind of medical certificate. You just have to have a driver's license. If you can drive a car, you can fly light sport. Still have to be at least 17 years old, still have to read, write, and speak English, still have a knowledge exam, still have your check ride. Hours, though, you only have to have half the hours. So for the people who, like, if you have no interest in getting additional ratings or being a commercial pilot, light sport is a good option because it's a lot less time, a lot less money. And then I did throw some stuff on ultralight. Ultralight's not as popular between the other two, but it's a lot easier. There's not necessarily any certificate required. There's not medical requirements. You have to get some training out, so you don't want to go up with something if you have no idea how to operate it. And then it just says if you're going to do like a powered parachute, you got to have 12 hours training, lighter 10 hours. You want to operate a hot air balloon, 7 hours. So there's lots of options. So it's really just knowing.
Category, motor glider. You need no medical, no pilot license. You have like a 10 flight checkout, and then you do it with EPE. And some of those are maybe more capable than light sport and practical and have a lot of limitations.
Yeah.
They're also, since it's not a video, they're a little more expensive, but it's an option.
Yeah. So it's really just kind of depending for you, like what would I want to do, and then kind of determining which category is best for you. So coming back to the medical certificates, so there are some medical, health issues that can preclude a person from getting a certain certificate. So that's why it's important to do your research, know your health, know what's precluded and what isn't. There are, unfortunately, there's mental health diagnoses that can impact what certificate you can get also. Current statistics show that 98% of pilots can work through any kind of special circumstance. So if you were someone that has something that you thought would preclude you, there are ways to get information and find out more about that before seeking a certain certificate. For instance, one of the potential preclusions is if you have any kidney health issues. Well, I have a history of kidney stones, so I actually had to go through what's called a CACI process. So it's basically an exception process where I had additional testing done to show that I currently have kidney stones. Kidneys are functioning well. Had a urologist sign off on that. Then I saw the medical examiner. It's like, oh, yep, you're good. Whereas if I had just walked into the examiner and said I had all this, you'd be like, oh, no. And one of the reasons why you want to do your research is because if you pursue your medical certificate and get denied, there is an appeal process, but if the final answer is that you're denied, you cannot do anything, not even light sport. So you don't want to get started into the process knowing that you might have a health issue, especially if you know that you don't want to fly commercially or anything like that. There's no point to go through that process if you don't need to. But there are, like I said, there are resources to find out the information. So I actually went through the AOPA. So the AOPA is just another organization that's out there that's to help pilots. They do have a free trial membership. So what I did was I took advantage of the free trial membership. They have like a special department that handles like the medical related questions. I called them, I said, this is my history. What do I need to do? They walked me through everything. I did all the things they told me before going to the examiner, got cleared, didn't have any issues. So if you take advantage of the resources that are out there, you shouldn't have any issue. But it's just, again, research and know what you need to do.
And you know the doctor that will pass you, that will walk you through this down in dead sends, so that you're not going to go in and flunk it down.
Yeah, so Dr. Stein, that's actually who I
Scott
saw.
Stein, yeah,
Yep.
that's who you need to talk to.
He was amazing. There are some examiners that are very friendly, they're very helpful. So if you want to reach out to him or if you have questions, we do have some of his cards available. But really, it's just like kind of knowing what those potential preclusions could be and not getting yourself in a situation where you get denied and you can't get anything. So, and then the FAA does have a website. I have it listed on the side. We'll email you these slides also when we're done. But there is a link on here where you can go to find medical examiner. Any questions so far? Okay. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about privileges. So this kind of breaks down the difference between like private pilot and light sport. So, and this is based on current regulations. So right now, if you want to carry passengers as a light sport pilot, you can take one passenger with you. If you know that, hey, it's probably just going to be me, maybe it'll be a significant other, or maybe I want to take a buddy sometime. That's one thing. But if you know, like, hey, I want to be able to take my whole family. I've got 2 kids and a wife. You know, obviously you'll need your private pilot. You can't fly more than one passenger as a light sport pilot. That is not something that's going to change with Mosaic. Also, as a private pilot, you can fly at night. Light sport, you can't. So one of the reasons I chose private pilot was because we want to travel so much. We knew that there would be times where we probably have to fly in the dark. Another thing is, and I don't think it's on here, is weather. So like if you're a light sport pilot, you can't go through clouds, you can't fly in them, you can't punch through them to get above them. You have to have a private pilot and an instrument rating for that. And since we're going to be traveling so much, we know that there's going to be times where we're going to have to be able to get through the clouds. So that's why I chose private pilot, just so I can fly at night, fly through the weather. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Airspace restrictions, there's not really a whole lot of airspace restrictions with your private pilot. Sport pilot, there's a few, I don't know if I'd say restrictions, there's just like extra training that you have to do and things you have to consider to go through different airspaces, and there are several different kinds of airspace that you'll learn about as you do your training. Additional ratings, so as a private pilot, there are several different ratings that you can get, instrument being one of them, and then multi-engine, different things like that. And then sport pilot really just kind of depends. So you can be like a light sport and get like your tail wheel endorsement, or you can do like a seaplane endorsement. So there are things that you can do, but like there are ratings that you can't get as a light sport. So you want to know the differences, because if you're thinking, oh, I want to fly this and I want to do this, can I do it with this certificate? So just doing your research. Flying for charity, so like doing like charitable events, causes. Private pilot, you can do that. Light sport, you can't. So it's again knowing. If you want to, there's a lot of organizations out there that they fly like human trafficking victims somewhere to get help. Or there's people that like rescue animals. If you know that, hey, I've got a heart to do this kind of work, I want to do this, you would need a private pilot. If you're like not really interested, which is totally fine, you don't need it. And then aircraft restrictions, there are a lot more restrictions with the light sport compared to private pilot. We'll come back to Mosaic here in just a moment. Because there are a lot of differences in aircraft. As a private pilot, you can pretty much fly anything you want as long as you get the appropriate training and ratings for those. Light sport, you are very limited to the weight of the airplane, stall speed, things like that. So right now, without Mosaic going through, there aren't a whole lot of planes that a light sport pilot can. There's not a lot of variation. There's a lot of planes out there, but there's not a lot of variations between kind of planes. And then I do have the ultralight. I'm not going to go through the ultralight list just because it's not as popular, but it's on there for you to look at later. All right, so coming back to Mosaic, why does this matter? Right now, so this is something that the EAA has been working on with the FAA for several years now. There's been a lot of back and forth. There's been comments from pilots. But it really has just been advocating for pilots to have more options and things to do and things to fly. So we've got this broken down by what the current regulations are and what's changing. So one of the things that you'll see there at the top is currently the planes that you fly as a light sport can only be 2 passengers. So you can, or 2 seats. So you can fly one person, it's a 2-seat plane, that's all you get. Once Mosaic goes through, you can fly an airplane that will hold 4 people. You can't fly 4 people, but you can fly a bigger airplane. So that's gonna give you it's gonna give you more room, it's gonna give you more speed, more weight, things like that. Stall speed is gonna change, so right now, and stall speed is something that you'll learn a lot about in your training, but stall speed right now with regulations can only be at 45 knots. With the proposal going through, you're gonna be at 54 knots, so it just kind of gives you more options. Takeoff weight, so right now you cannot take off in a plane that weighs more than 1,400 pounds, 1,430 pounds. Planes are not necessarily as heavy as you think. That there are a lot of light planes out there, but if you're flying like a two-seater and your maximum weight is 1,400 and you're 160, 170, you've got someone else that's like, same weight, you get full fuel, you're gonna be like right at maximum weight. You don't have a lot of room. So if you wanna take a bag somewhere, anything like that, you just don't get the weight that you would. Once the proposal goes through, you're gonna be at 3,000 pounds. So again, you can only take one passenger, so like yourself, one person, you'll have plenty of weight to spare. So if you wanna take a day trip or like an overnight trip, you can do that because you'll have the extra weight in the plane. Does that make sense?
I would say my Cherokee, I can fly 4 people with 3 Americans.
Yeah.
You cannot get four-wheel-sized people in there.
Yeah.
I had, Kurt and Dad at ours.
I've done it with young Eagles, kids. Other than that, it's not happening.
Guys didn't like it.
Yeah, so it really just, and again, so it comes back to like, do you want to have a family that you're going to travel with someday? Or like, no, I just want to go by myself or take a buddy. Those are things to kind of keep in mind. The speed is a big difference. So right now you can't find anything that can go faster than 120 knots. But with the Mosaic regulations going through, you'll be able to find something that can go up to 250 knots. So obviously that's like doubling the speed. And then engine, no, I think right now, so you have to, under current regulations, single engine aircraft is all that you're limited to, or all that you can fly. With the new ruling, you can fly potentially like a multi-engine as long as it still meets the other requirements.
Even a jet.
Yeah, even a jet. I mean, you can, but it's still got to meet the other requirements. So what this is going to do for the aviation community is all those people that have no desire to be commercial pilots, suddenly they're going to have all these other airplanes at their disposal, which is going to be a lot more, not to say that the other planes aren't fun, but it just gives you more options. And then some of the other things on there, adjustable propellers, ground adjustable only right now, so that's going to change. Retractable gear, so again, that changes the planes available to you right now. So as a light sport currently, you couldn't fly anything with retractable gear. Once this ruling goes through, you could fly something with retractable gear. So again, that gives you more options and more availability of planes that you can fly. And then the safety bulletins, we won't get into all of that. Time before overhaul. That's stuff that you learn in your training. So any questions about any of that? It's kind of a lot of information.
That's a lot of changes.
It is a lot of changes. And also everybody in the aviation, especially the ones that are like light sport, we're really excited because wow, now we're gonna have all these planes available to us. It's in like the speed, like
I can spend more money.
Well, I mean again, but it's knowing your mission. If you know, hey, I want a bigger plane, even though it's just gonna be in a buddy or whatever. If you want that extra weight where you can take a couple, bags of luggage or something like that, it's really just knowing your mission. But yeah, the changes are huge. So we've been watching this pretty closely, especially for us personally, since Blake's going to be pursuing his light sport. As far as the update, where they are in the process, we are expecting them to announce it later this year, with it going into effect within 60 to 90 days after they announce it. So our hope is that by the end of this year, it'll be all in effect.
This is the government we're dealing with. This is supposed to come into effect 2 years ago, I think.
Well, I mean, they've been talking. Yeah, so it's the government. Enough said.
But they're hoping to have it announced by
Oshkosh was the initial.
Right.
Bill, yes.
So they might surprise us that Oshkosh can announce it. They may wait until later.
They announced that Sun and Fun this year that they're expecting
the
to come out
stall speed, I
August.
think it's still being negotiated. They're trying to get it
This isn't set in stone. They may adjust this and maybe.
Right, well, because it is the government, they can change it last minute, but this is what the current proposal is stating. So if you're thinking like, oh, that sounds like light sport might be right for me, just keep an eye on that. Because that'll impact training and things like that.
If you don't have any friends, then a two-seater is perfect.
So, all right, so we were initially going to take a break at this point. Are you doing okay? Do you feel like you can get up and stretch or anything?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. We will push on through. All right, so flight training. So we're going to kind of talk about what that looks like. So there's two types of lessons that you have to do for your flight training. You've got your ground school and your actual flying lessons. So ground school is something that you have a few options on. You can do that with your instructor, and the instructors have like their own hourly fee, or there are several online programs out there. So what I did was I actually went through Sporties. I paid like about $200 some. But if you do the Sporties route, once you buy it, you got it for life. It doesn't ever deactivate. Every time they update their materials, you get all those updates, so you have all the information at your disposal pretty much forever. Also within Sporties, and I'm going to talk about Sporties quite a bit just because that's who I went through, but there are other options, so don't feel like I'm trying to pressure you in Sporties. I will say, if you do the Sporties, you get a lot of things digitally, so like when we're done, if you want to come up and look at any of this stuff, you can. This is just everything I use for training. But a lot of these books, you get free digitally. So I like the paper, so I bought the books because I just like having something to look at. But if you're like, nope, I'm good with digital, you get a lot of the stuff digitally free. So that saves you money potentially. And anytime those resources are updated, they're updated in Sporty, so you still get like the most up-to-date information. So you have your ground school, you have your flight lessons. Exams. So we talked about, you have a written exam, so it's like a 60-question exam, mostly multiple choice. There's a few fill in the answer questions. There are some like charting questions and mathematical calculations that you have to make. But to do your written exam, you have to have an endorsement from either your ground school program that you used or your instructor. So since I went through Sporties, once I went through all their testing materials, they have a practice exam that you take. And once you pass that, then they say, yep, you're good, here's your endorsement, and then you take your endorsement to like the testing center. If you go straightly through your instructor, kind of same thing, once they feel like they've given you all the knowledge, they'll sign an endorsement in your logbook, and you're good to go. But you do have to have that endorsement before you test. So I don't love testing, so it's not, I was a bit nervous about it, but it's 60 questions, so it's not like, hundreds of questions or anything like that, and there's plenty of resources to help you. One of the other things I used also, and this is not something that you get through Sporties, but this is just like private pilot oral exam. So this pretty much asks you every question that you can expect to have on the exam, and you can kind of study it and be prepared. So research, there's lots of resources out there. So if you're like, I don't know, there's a lot of resources that can kind of help you study and get prepared. And then again, the check ride. So your flight exam and your oral length of time really kind of varies. My check ride from like start to finish was like just over 3 hours. For some people, it's like an hour and a half. It really kind of depends on the examiner that you get. I use someone here locally. You pay them their own fee. Like they're not like usually part of a flight school or anything like that. So they can charge whatever they feel is appropriate to charge. And it can be a little pricey. So I think I paid I want to say I paid like $750. So that's an expense that you want to keep in mind.
Alice was like 400.
Well, yes, it's changed. Like if this was like $500,
it's not getting lower.
Yeah, it's not getting lower. Everything always.
These guys are private contractors, so they can charge whatever.
There's no regulation to what they can charge somebody. So you always want to find out what they charge and see if you can. Not that you want someone that's going to like charge you $200, like, oh yeah, you're fine. Like you want a good one. But definitely kind of look around and see what your options are.
And your instructor will have probably people he knows and trusts.
Yeah, or they'll help you like, maybe don't use that person, maybe use this person. Obviously, it's your choice because they're not affiliated with the school at all. But you definitely want to know like some things about the examiner.
So there's a couple in Terre Haute or more than that?
I think there's 2 in Terre Haute right now. I don't remember the name of the. Oh, there's somebody besides Ethan though.
Pardon?
There's somebody besides Ethan though.
Okay.
I forgot about Ethan.
Still
Yeah. So and then you just have to look in Bloomington to see if there's anyone local. If not, you can always. There are a lot of students that will travel to their examiner, and so.
I think there's a couple guys up in Muncie. I know what's his name come from St. Louis. Matt.
Yeah. So the unfortunate thing is flying is so dependent on the weather. Like you could schedule with an examiner, get ready to go that day, like, oh, the clouds, or oh, the winds, or now it's raining, and with scheduling, it can be hard to get into an examiner. I got into JP pretty easy, but just depending on your area, like I'm not familiar with the Bloomington area. So like I said, it's not unusual for people to travel to their DPE if that's what it takes. If you're good waiting 3 months, you know, that's fine. I wouldn't recommend it. Just because you want to keep your skill, and then if you're trying to keep your skill up, you're spending more time and money in the plane. So you don't want to necessarily have to push it out that far if you don't need to. But again, just know what your options are. The oral exam can be a little intimidating for me, just because I'm not a...
Or you cry like I did.
I didn't cry, but...
There's no crying in FAA exams.
There's no crying in aviation.
Just when the annual bill comes in.
Well, that's a whole other. So no, but the oral exam is what the examiner will do ahead of time is he'll give you a scenario. So like my scenario was like you and a friend are going to this wedding in St. Louis and you're going to leave at this time, and then it's up to you to figure out what route am I taking, can I get there in the plane that I'm taking, or do I need to stop for fuel? Where's my emergency divert going to be if that happens? Can I leave? Like, what if I leave at 10 o'clock at night? Am I okay to fly? Am I a light sport? Because I can't fly at night. Am I a private pilot? Oh, I can. So, like, you have to look at all those. He'll give you the scenario. You have to look at all those situations, and then he'll ask you about them. And then you also have to answer questions about, like, the systems of the plane. So you have to know about, like, the engine and, like, the electrical system and things like that. So, for me, I don't like public speaking anyway. So, doing like an oral exam for me was very intimidating. Some people are like, it's fine. Like, it's the flight that makes me nervous or whatever. So just kind of knowing yourself and knowing how to prepare so that you're comfortable. Most of the examiners, I mean, they know people get nervous. They know people might need a break. So if you need to like step away for a moment. And then something else to keep in mind for the oral exam is you are allowed. So this is like the current, there's actually one that just came out for 2025. So this isn't the most up to date. But this is something that has like all the policies and regulations per the FAA. You can have this with you at the oral exam. So if there's something you don't know, you can say, I don't have the answer, but let me find it for you. A lot of times if you can show that you can find it, then you're like,
Look, yeah.
Or you can use Google.
that depends on the examiner. JP, no.
It doesn't matter who you're using.
So I would just, but again, if you don't know an answer, it's okay, as long as you know how to find the answer. All right.
A good DPE will tell you, I don't expect you to be perfect.
Yeah.
I'm giving you this certificate so you have going to learn how to be flying.
Yeah.
All I'm doing is giving you the opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
They don't expect you to be perfect.
Yeah. No, the examiners just want to know that you can be safe. Like you know enough and you have enough skill to be safe in the plane. Because they are basically signing off saying
Because it makes it look bad if you go out and crash and kill yourself.
Yeah.
There's like a black mark on it.
Thank you for that, Rick. Yeah. So, and like I said, most of them are nice. They're very understanding, and that kind of thing. So, all right. So we will move on. So this is kind of the journey of what to expect with flight training. So, kind of start off learning like the basic skills. So you learn, what the controls do, like what the yoke does, what the ailerons do, things like that. You'll learn turns, climbs, descents, stalls, takeoffs and landings. We'll do some reference maneuvers. We learn how to communicate. So here at Hallman, we are controlled airspace, so we do have tower people that we talk to. Some airports, depending on where you do your training, don't have that, so you have to learn, you still have to learn how to communicate and let people know what you're doing, because you can't just there are people that do it, but it's not recommended that if you're at an uncontrolled airfield that you just take off and go down. There are other people in the air. You want them to know what you're doing so that you guys don't have a collision. So part of it is learning how to communicate in those kind of airspaces. And then all of that is kind of leading you up to your solo. So that's the point that you get to where you are flying the plane on your own for the first time. I will say, and I don't know how many others can agree, there's no feeling like getting in the airplane for your first time, knowing that I am in control, nobody is with me. I soloed, how many hours was I at? And it varies, like some people solo at 8 hours, some people at 40 hours. It really just kind of depends on how fast you learn and how quickly you build the skill. I think I was at, I want to say 13-ish hours when I soloed. I wasn't 100% confident that I was ready, but my instructor was pretty sure I was ready. She was like, nope, we're doing it. I was like, went up and it was fine. And typically what they'll have you do is you'll go up, you'll do 3 laps on the powder, and then 3 times you come back in. So it's not anything, you're not going out anywhere crazy by yourself. You're just demonstrating that you can manage the airplane. That first landing, mine was, not to brag, but it was pretty good. I won't say that every landing since then has been that good, but that first landing, when it landed, it was really soft. I got tears in my eyes. It's like, oh my gosh, I did that. I can do this. And so there's no experience like solo for your first time. So all that initial training is kind of leading you to that moment. Once you get past that, then you do what's called the cross-country navigation. So this sounds intimidating. It's really not. Basically, you have to pick out 3 different airports. So you'll take off from one airport, fly to another, land, take off, fly to another, land, take off, come back home. And it's really just demonstrating that you can navigate, that you can find your way from place to place, that you can do weather planning, you can make good decisions about weather, and things like that. I will say with this part of training, this is going to depend on your CFI. We have tech everywhere around us, so there are devices that you can use to navigate. A lot of CFIs now are like, you can use that, that's fine, that's just kind of the world we live in. But there are other CFIs that, no, you don't get to use that until you demonstrate that you can do it by paper. So I had a CFI that did that. I actually really appreciate that because iPads and phones and things like that are great. There's a use for them. If they die or they overheat, you have to be able to navigate. If you don't know how to do that without looking at a screen, then you're going to be in trouble. So more than likely what you'll have to learn to do is go get something that's called a sectional chart. So you can look at this later if you want. But this is like, this shows you like every airspace area, every airport in the area, things like that. So use something like that to figure out what direction do I need to go? What's my heading going to be? What am I looking for along the way to know that I'm still en route? So that's that. So that's kind of something to keep in mind for training. We do have an iPad that we use, and I was able to use once I demonstrated that I could do all that. But that's going to be part of your learning also. And then you have to do, there's actually 2 solo cross countries that you'll have to do. My first solo cross country was from here to Evansville to Mount Carmel and back. And I actually flew that with my instructor twice before doing it on my own, just kind of wanted to make sure that I was comfortable and knew what I was doing. My second solo cross country was from here to Effingham to Decatur, Illinois, and back. So there's not any, you're not required, like your CFI is not going to tell you like, hey, you need to go to this airport. Like you can kind of decide for yourself where you want to go. The main thing is that 2 of the airports have to be at least 100 nautical miles apart. Because anybody could fly from like here, like say, to Paris and back. Like you can almost see all 3 of those airports at the same time, depending on where you are. So you just want something that's far enough to show that, hey, I can go long distance and I can do the same thing. And then once you get past that and you've taken your exam, your written exam and that stuff, then your CFI will know that you're ready to start preparing for your check ride. So that's where your CFI gets a little harder on you. Your CFI, if you have a good CFI, they might make you feel like you have to be perfect. You don't. They just don't want you to make more mistakes during your check ride than necessary. So that's where you kind of like hone in those skills, get those landings just right, get those reference points just right, things like that. So, and then once they feel that you're ready to do your check ride, they'll let you know, they'll give you endorsement for that, and then you're free to start looking for an examiner. So any questions about any of that? All right, we'll keep on going. So, how to train, what's that gonna look like? There are options. So I used Hoosier Aviation, which is here at the airport. Most people, not everybody, but most people end up going through a flight school. So I don't remember in Bloomington what's available there. I don't think they have a flight school at the, do you know?
They have one.
Do they?
EAA
Okay.
Aviation.
Okay, so you can go through a flight school. You're going to pay by hour for the airplane. You're going to pay the instructor by hour. And then some flight schools, you have to pay for the fuel. Here at Hoosier, you don't pay for fuel. So that's a nice bonus because fuel can get expensive depending on how much flying you're doing. So there's not a lot of upfront costs that are associated with doing your training through a flight school. The downside to it is, especially here at Hoosier, they are a very busy flight school. They have several aircraft, but it can still be hard to get something rented because there's so many students trying to get the same planes. So you kind of have to stay ahead. So when I was training, I would have my stuff scheduled, like I would book my reservations at least 2 weeks out so that I knew I was going to get the plane. So that's an option. Another option is a flying club. So here in Terre Haute, we don't actually have a flying club, which is unfortunate. Some areas do. So a flying club is basically a group of people that have like bought into ownership of a plane and they kind of share ownership. So it's kind of a cheaper way to get your training done. Some clubs have like instructors, some don't. But it's an option. So if that's something that you're not familiar with, you can probably just Google it to see if there's a local flying club in that area. There's a lot of people in our chapter that actually learn to fly that way. So they are a great resource. Other option, and this is the least common one, is buying your own aircraft to start with. So, might sound kind of crazy. There is a benefit to it. So obviously, if you're buying your own aircraft, you can't fly it. So you're gonna have to have somebody like fly and pick it up and bring it to your local airport. They'll have to ferry it for you. But if you know, like, hey, I want to get my certificate and I want to fly this kind of airplane, and you know you're gonna buy one anyway, and you have the money to do that, you can buy it, train in it. That way, when you get your certificate, you're very familiar with it, you're very familiar with it. Obviously, it's a much higher upfront cost because planes are not cheap. We'll get into that a little bit. Mike's actually going to give us some information about flight prices. But it is an option. We've talked about it several times. Since he's going to do light sport, we've talked about buying a Champ early for him to train in, because we're going to buy one anyway. So, if you've got the money, it's an option. If you don't, then it wouldn't be an option. But
good thing about training in a rental is if you bend it, it's not yours.
That's true too. I mean, student pilots, because we're learning and we're training, like, you might make a mistake. So if you bust a wheel or something, you don't have to.
Talk to the maintenance guy out here. They'll tell you some of these ISU airplanes, they change the tires 2 or 3 times a month.
Yes.
Because they got the kids will land with the brakes on. Those flat spots on the brake on the tires after that.
Yeah.
He had one I was over there. He put new ones on in the morning and then was back over there putting new ones on in the afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah, and their aircraft, they get a lot of use with their aircraft for sure, because they're affiliated with ISU. So
it takes a lot of bad landings to get the good landings.
It does, and that's the thing. Like, landings are one of the hardest things to get down.
I'm still trying to get to that point.
Yeah. And there's a thing, like, any landing you walk away from was a good landing. So obviously you don't want to break your plane.
And if you can use a plane again, it's a great landing.
Yes. So
that guy out there was only a good landing.
Yeah.
And we joke because we all know, like, landings are tough. Like, there's a lot that goes into them, a lot of factors, and the airplanes can take more than you think they can. I know there are a couple times where I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I just busted the plane.
I think the biggest problem is when you're first learning, you are not trying to be perfect, you're not trying to grease it in, so you're less. But as you go along, you're trying to make everyone a perfect landing, so you're over controlling, and instead of just, that's me.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be this perfect, shit.
Yeah. So a lot of people, when they're training, they get very discouraged when they're doing their landings, but there's really not a reason to be. It'll come a time. And even there are pilots that have been flying for like 30, 40 years and they don't always get it right. It's just.
Alice had a problem with that. I told her, I said, you're making this harder than it has to be. Just point it towards the ground until it stops.
It'll come down.
Well, the weather changes all the time, so to say that you're going to have a perfect landing all the time is very nice.
Yeah. And especially since, we live in the Midwest, the weather's very finicky. Very bipolar, so.
And landing out here spoils you. You got 9,000 foot of runway. It's like when just pointing towards the runway, you got lots of room.
Yeah, not all. And so something that you'll learn in training is with like cross country planning is like you'll be looking at runway lengths and calculating how many feet do I need to land? Can I land at this airport, or do I need a longer runway? I'm very spoiled here with these really long runways because that's.
And the best landings will be when there's nobody looking.
That is true.
And your worst ones will be when.
I still think my best landing was my very first solo. And now I'm like, nobody's ever going to believe me that I had a good landing because these have not been good. So, but that's just part of learning and training. So if you can get past that and know, like, you will get there. You will get there. So any questions about any of that information? Okay. So some things to keep in mind when you're looking at flight instructors. So we definitely recommend getting to know like who the people are, things like that. It is okay to interview CFIs and talk to them about their goals. There are a lot of CFIs out here that, they're just trying to get their hours in so that they can be an airline pilot. So they might not be here as long. There are some that know they're going to be here longer. So you definitely want to know, is your CFI going to be here throughout your training, or are you going to have to change? I will add to that, changing CFI is not the worst thing in the world. Most CFIs are pretty good at what they do. And it's actually, so my CFI actually wanted me to fly with a couple different CFIs because every CFI is a little different. They kind of hone in on different things. Their focus area is a little different. So, and it's also very easy, like if I was your CFI, I get very used to what you're doing. I might not pick up on things, where someone who's brand new is like, oh, what's happening? Or, oh, let me help you with this. So it's definitely beneficial to fly with some different CFIs at some point. But still, you want to know, am I going to be changing CFI every other week? Or am I going to have one that's going to be here a couple of months? So just don't be afraid to ask questions. They expect people to ask those questions.
Don't be afraid to change. Like if you start flying with the instructor and you just feel like you're not really driving with them, I mean, change.
Well,
I think you're not.
It's your money.
Right.
You are paying them for a service. And you know, like, as adults, we don't get along with everybody that we meet. So if you've got someone you feel like you're just not communicating well, or it's just not going well, it's meant to be fun. Like, it's not meant for you to be up there and frustrated with your instructor, or they're frustrated with you.
Yes, I did
like
a discovery flight down with the instructor in Sullivan at like sport. And the plane was great, the flight was good, but I just didn't mesh well with the instructor. I knew after that first lesson, or introductory
That's
lesson.
right, nobody does it, nobody else does either.
Yeah, so that's, I was like, okay, this guy isn't the one for me. So.
Yeah, and that's okay. If you get to that point, you're like, I don't think I'm going to do well. It's okay. Change instructors. You can do that. There are some independent CFIs out there. Obviously, if you go through a flight school, they have several instructors for you to choose from. If you go through an independent CFI, there's a lot of things to keep in mind. So, like, is this their primary job? Is this their side job? How many hours can they commit to their students? That kind of thing. But the positive thing with the independent CFIs, if they're teaching and they're not part of a flight school, then you know they love aviation and they enjoy teaching because they're not going to do it otherwise. So that's something to keep in mind. The downside is if you've got an independent CFI, they might not want you flying their plane because that changes insurance. So you might have to have your own airplane or something like that. Whereas flight school CFIs, AirCap, they've got it all. You don't have to worry about having your own plane or anything like that. And then again, I mentioned earlier, some flying clubs do have CFIs available. So just knowing what your options. And then these are some of the questions that you can ask the CFI. So what's their long-term goal? How long are they going to be around? Scheduling protocol. So that varies from like CFI to CFI in flight school. Here at Hoosier Aviation, they have like an online system. So like once you get started with your flight school, you get in their system and then you can go in and schedule however you want. There are some limits. So you can't just go in there and like schedule to fly something by yourself. Like you have to put that you're with an instructor or something like that. But I think that's pretty common with flight schools is like there's an online system that you just go into and you just reserve whatever's available. And it'll tell you if the plane's available, it'll tell you if the instructor's available. So usually you do something like that, but you want to know like what their expectation is. Lesson plans, you want to make sure that they're following the ACS, so that's the Airman Certification Standard. So that's like that's everything that you need to know for like pilot training and an exam and your check ride and all that. So they should be following that pretty closely. Sporties has that available. You can Google that and get that so you can make sure that your CFI is going through all the appropriate steps with you. But you want to make sure that they are using something and they're not just like, oh, you show up and like, oh, I think we'll do this today. Like you want to make sure that they have.
We don't need to know how to use VOR.
Yeah, so I will just for transparency, this is a good learning opportunity. I actually failed my check ride because of VOR. And if that's not something you're familiar with, it's basically like a navigational tool that you can use in the airplane. The plane I was flying, that was the only navigational tool that was in it. So per the check ride standards, like you have to be able to use what's in your plane. I had one lesson on it, like in the very beginning of my training, and we kind of touched it since then. And the unfortunate part was it also doesn't work in the plane, like it's not accurate. So when I got in the plane and it came to that part, I had to kind of like dial it in, and I couldn't remember how to do it, and I failed. So did it suck? Sure. Is it embarrassing? Sure. Something else, and I didn't say this earlier, something to keep in mind, if you fail your check ride, it's not the end of the world. There are a lot of pilots that file for something basic. What you can do in that moment is you can choose to continue the flight to do everything else to demonstrate like, okay, I can't do this, but I can do all these things. Or some people say like let's just stop, and then they'll come back another day and do the rest of the things. It's not a big deal. What I had to do, since I failed just this one thing, like the next I think the check ride was on a Friday, so I had to wait till like Monday for Hoosier to be open. I went up with the CFI. We did a couple flights to a couple different VORs here in Indiana, and VORs, unfortunately, like they're kind of being phased out. We don't really use them, so it's very frustrating. Cause like now I've got a test on this stupid thing that I'm probably never going to use, but it is what it is. But I went up with an instructor, and then like that same day, I literally went up with the examiner. We took off from 2-3. The VOR is like right over here. We literally went up and came right back down. Like I dialed into it when I was on like my downwind, and he said, "Okay, you're good." Landed. So it was like a 5-minute flight. Not a big deal. It is costly. Like I had to pay like half of the check ride fee again. So you don't want to. Nobody wants to fail their check ride, but all that to say, if you fail, it's not a big deal. You go back with your instructor, they go over it with you, you go back up with the examiner. Not a big deal. There's no rule that says, well, if you fail once or you fail twice or fail 3 times, you can't do it. It's just.
Oh, there's people out there that may have failed multiple times.
Yeah. So I mean, if I failed like 5 times, I might wonder if I really should be a pilot. But you get the point. Like it's not the end of the world.
Maybe you should take a skydiving.
Well, you know, maybe I'll make like skydive. Start crashing the plane. No.
You know what they say, at first you don't succeed, skydiving is not for you.
yeah, probably. So, and then any other, you might ask them like how many students. So I know right now there's a couple instructors that don't have a whole lot of students, so they have more availability. But if you've got an instructor that's got like 10 to 20 students, it might be harder to fly as often as you'd like to just because they don't have the time. And then another really good question to ask them is how many students have you had pass their training? And if they've had 100 students, that's fine, but how many of those have actually completed? Because that's going to tell you if you've got a CFI or if you've got one that maybe doesn't teach as well as they need to or something like that. So the downside with that is if you've got kind of like the newer instructor that's like straight out of college or something, or straight out of their training, they might not have that much experience.
One tip I learned was, if you're going to take your check ride, make sure it's a 2-seat airplane, because every now and then the FAA will show up and want to do a ride-along. And you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to flunk that check ride if you have an FAA guy out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, my training was in a 2-seater, thankfully, so I didn't have to worry about that. Doesn't happen very often, but the thing with the FAA is like they're government, they can do what they want, they can show up anytime they want. You could be out there like getting ready to just go do a training flight, and they could be here like, oh, they're doing ramp inspections today. And there's certain things that you have to have as a student pilot, like you have to have your ID, you have to have your student pilot certificate, your medical. Like if you don't have any of those things, and FAA happens to pop up and they're doing ramp checks, you're gonna get some trouble.
Odds of that are pretty much.
Out here, rarely. I think once in my training, they're like, oh, they're doing ramp inspections today. So it's not. And again, as long as you know that you have everything with you and you're doing everything right, it's not a big deal.
They don't have a manual for that anymore. They really don't.
Yeah. So. All right. So, any questions about any of that? Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about supplies that you need, things that you don't absolutely need. So I've got everything up here on this table that I use in my training. You Dale.
You got a donut in his hand again. I think you have one in his hand when he left.
So, and just another quick thing, and I don't know how often you come this way, but a shout out to Aviation. So they actually do free ground school lessons every first and third Saturday of the month. So if you're ever this way and you want some knowledge, whether you're formally in training or not, it's free information. So they kind of vary through the topics. Today was like on flight, but they've talked about engine systems. They've talked about cross-country planning. They've talked about weather. So it's always a different topic. So if you're in that area and you want to make, we actually have there's a married couple that comes from the Bloomington area for every single one of them.
He flies and does lessons out of here as well.
Yeah, so it's an option. It's a tool. Doesn't hurt to use.
And free donuts.
They do have free donuts. I mean, we like food. If you don't know that by now.
I also go 100 miles for a free donut.
Yes, we love to eat. So just wanted to throw that out there so that you know that happens. So everything that's on this table are the things that I use to complete my training. So one of your biggest expenses for training is going to be a headset. So there are all sorts of headsets out there. What I will tell you is you want one that fits well, that's comfortable, that you can hear well. You don't want to be up in the airspace and ATC is staticky because you've got a bad pair or a bad headset. I've got noise canceling ones. We actually had the opportunity. So last year we were camping over by the Cincinnati area. That's where like the Sporties headquarters is. So they have like a really nice building on site. They have their flight school on site. They have a store. So I actually went into their store and I tried on like all sorts of headsets. I am very particular about the way that things fit on my head and like the weight. I don't like a lot of weight on my head. So there was a pair that we had tried on. You pop on in here? Are you? Sure. If you like, we're just talking about like flight training.
Okay.
So we had gone to Oshkosh. I don't think it was last year. I think it was the year before. And we had tried on some headsets and like, oh, these, like everybody talks about Bose like being one of the best ones out there. We tried on some. We listened to them like, oh, these are really great. So when I went to Sporties last year, I thought I'll probably get a pair of Bose. Then I tried on like several of them. I tried on David Clark's. The Bose were actually too heavy for my head. When I put those on and then put like the David Clark's on my head, the David Clark's felt a lot more comfortable. Obviously not everybody, it's not like we have a store here in town or in Bloomington that you can go and, try on a bunch of headsets, but definitely do your research because they are costly. The David Clark set that I have was just under $1,000, so it's a pretty costly investment, but if you know that you're going to be flying long term, it is worth the money. There are cheaper ones out there. There's some out there that are like, $100, $200. Doesn't mean they're bad, but again, if you want something that's going to last long term, that's noise canceling because airplanes are loud. Imagine that.
Yes, they have passive headsets that are cheaper.
Yeah, so like the passive ones are the ones that you're going to find they're like $100, $200. Some students will get the cheaper ones for their flight training and then get a better pair later. That's fine too. Me, I just knew that I was going to be flying long term anyway, so it's like I'm just going to bite the bullet.
Well,
Buy
most
one
of the flight
headset.
schools will have it.
They do. So Hoosier has like several pairs that they loan out.
Yeah,
Doesn't
I
cost you
use the
anything.
rentals and they're comfortable enough and I
Yeah.
can hear well enough for me and I wouldn't necessarily need $1,000 headset. I'd be okay with all the rentals.
Yeah. So it's just kind of knowing like, is it worth it for me right now, or can I get by with something cheaper? Talking to a flight school, seeing what they have available. That is a way. If you use some from the flight school, that obviously gives you a free way to try some out. Like, are these good? Are they okay? Do I like them? Are they comfortable? That kind of thing. So yeah. So that's kind of like one of the biggest expenses. Logbooks. There are like a million kind of logbooks out there. My logbook is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I didn't get like a super thick one because I don't intend to do like commercial flying or anything like that. So you'll see some pilots have like really thick ones because they're doing a lot of flying. Me, I knew like I'm recreational. I'm not going to do this for a career. You can Google these. You can look them up on Amazon. Corsair over here sells them. There's no right or wrong logbook, and you can flip through this later when you want. But it's basically just something where you're talking about like date that you flew, what you flew, where you flew to, that kind of thing. So you can log the actual hours. Do you have to have one of those? What else? So flight computer. And I apologize, I forgot that the batteries actually died in mine, so you can't like really play around with it. But the flight computer, you can do like an electronic one. There's also a manual one that you can use. I hate the manual. That's personal preference. I don't like them.
I can work it faster than I can that digital.
And I can't. See, and you can, there are apps so that you can get apps for this so that you don't have to, because this is pricey. Like this is almost 200?
I thought it was like 150.
Okay, maybe 150. So you're going to spend some money on
But the
this.
thing is, you can't use your phone on exam. It has to be a certified
Yes.
flight.
So when you do your knowledge exam, so your written exam and your check ride, you can use FIT, like something like this, or you can use the manual one. You'll see what the manual one is in your training and you can kind of decide for yourself. I think they're a lot more complicated. I'd rather just hit a few buttons on here and know what I'm doing. But you have to have one or the other. That's what's going to help you do like your calculations with your navigating and things like that. Calculating like weight, fuel, those kind of things. Sectional and plotter. So the sectional, I kind of indicated earlier, this is something that I can pull up on my iPad as well. But again, depending on your instructor, they might be like, yep, pull it up on your iPad, you're good. Some are gonna be like, nope, you gotta have the paper. The only caveat with that, is the paper sectionals are only good for just under 3 months. So you definitely wanna make sure that you're using a current one. They don't go, like the actual information on them doesn't change that much necessarily, but like if you're doing your exam or if your examiner looks at your sectional and it's outdated, you're gonna fail your exam because you're not using appropriate resources. So just be aware of that. And they have the dates on it so you know what the time period is. They're not very expensive. I usually buy mine here at Corsair for like $10 or something. They're they're not a big deal. But you do have to have something like that. Also, just a plotter, something that looks like this. So this is what's going to help you like measure the distance on the chart and stuff like that, calculate your heading. And not all of them have like the little spinny. I like the little spinny. But that's going to help you like find like the heading that you need to like navigate to. So you'll need one of those. Those are very, very inexpensive, not a big deal. I kind of walked through, I didn't really walk through study materials, so there's a couple different books, and you got like, what's called like the PHAC, so this is the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, which is pretty much anything you would need to know about flying, about systems, things like that. Then the Airplane Flying Handbook, so this goes more in depth about maneuvers that you're gonna have to do. I didn't use this one a whole lot in studying, but I did reference it quite a bit, like if I needed clarification or like a more in-depth explanation. So there's that one. This one is the Airman Knowledge Testing Supplement. So this is something that you can take to your written exam. This is something that kind of like has different scenarios.
Like any chart or image that's going to be on the test, this is the
it will be in this book. So the good thing is like you can get this in advance, kind of flip through it and know what to expect and have an idea what the correct answers are and how the answers are found. So you don't necessarily have to have this one, but it's worth it, and it's not.
That was like $7.
Yeah, it says on here, so not expensive. These ones can get kind of pricey, but again, if you end up doing like the sporties, you can get the free version digitally. Have to have this. Already talked about that one. So as far as like books go, that's all you absolutely have to have. There is a chart supplement guide that I would recommend you get. So this kind of goes with the chart. It talks about
Basically, it's all there for
like airport information, because they can't obviously fit absolutely everything on a sectional. There's like too much information. So if you need more information about, like if you know you're flying into an airport, let's say in Arkansas, and you can't find enough information on the chart, you can go to this and it'll have absolutely everything you need to know. We don't use it a whole lot, but it's definitely a good reference. And then Albert showed you earlier, help with the oral exam. So the one with these four here in the front are the ones that you have to have. Well, I guess I like. What else as far as things that have to? As far as books, that's it. We talked a little bit about the iPad. So once we're done, if you want to come up here and see what a sectional looks like on a device, we have that up here. So we use Foresight. So there's a couple different, or I want to say systems out there, things that you can use for. So like Apple, Foresight is Apple only. There's also what's called Garmin Pilot. So that's for like Android devices. They're both very similar. They're a little different, but basically they have anything that you need to know about the chart. So like this holds like this information and this information, kind of all at your fingertips. And this you can plan a route, you can punch in like your destination and it does everything for you. It tells you how long it's going to take to get there, what your heading needs to be, how much fuel you're going to use, all those things. And then it'll kind of break, like it does what's called the weather briefing also. So you don't have to go look at the weather a million places. You can pull like, this is what the weather is going to be doing. And it'll let you know if there's any warnings that you need to be aware of. So you don't have to have a device. Definitely worth it. I think, is there anybody in here that does not use a device when flying? Yeah, so technology, we live in a tech-dependent society, but it is worth having. I keep like an extra charger in my flight bag, so if it does die, I can charge it. Something to keep in mind on your check ride also, some DPEs will let you use it throughout your exam, some won't. Mine did not. He would not let me turn on like the GPS, so I couldn't navigate with it until we got to like a certain point. But there are some DPs that also like, okay, now it failed, what are you gonna do? And then you can't use it. If you have backup, if you say, oh, I've got a charger right here, they might be like, okay, you're good. Well, now that's done, now we're gonna do. So you have to have like backup plans. You don't wanna just rely on the one device. You wanna make sure, and then I will say I did most of my training throughout the summer. So it gets very hot up there in the airplane. Mine did die because it overheated like on 2 different occasions. So like you have to know, what am I gonna do if this doesn't work? Can I pull it up on my phone? Is that a backup? Because that's an option. What if that's not an option? What if that's done? So keep chargers with you, keep extra batteries for different things, and then again, if you have a good CFI that makes you learn all the paper stuff, you can always fall back to that.
So do you have to have a backup or not?
You don't have to have a backup, but if something like in your exam, if they fail it and you don't have a backup, then you're going to fail the exam. So just be
For
prepared.
flight, but you have 3 devices.
Yes.
Yeah, I
So
mean, there's my second device.
yeah. So for flight, like a lot of things you can. So we're kind of weird. We love our iPads. We love our Android phones. So we use for flight because we have the iPad. There are a couple of free things out there that you can put on an Android phone. But if you're like an Apple person and you've got iPads and iPhones and things like that, or if you've got Android tablets, if Android phones, then you've got Garmin Pilot. There are lots of options, but yes, having like a backup is just smart. A flight bag.
I've got a wife, she tells me where to go.
Well, there you go.
And I'm usually right.
Well, there you go, even better. You don't have to have a flight bag. I purchased one because obviously there's a lot of materials that you take with you, so it's just easier. Flight bags, you can look online, there's a million of them. It's really just knowing what you like to carry around. And then the headset bag, most headsets, pretty much any headset that you buy is going to have its own bag. So you can just carry that by itself. I like to carry that in my flight bag. And then the other option is, again, online study course. So if you want to do ground school on your own online, you can do that. I did not say this earlier, but one of the really good parts about like the online study courses is completely at your own pace. It's when you have time. You're not paying anybody to do it. So you kind of like walk yourself through it. Sporties has a bunch of different videos that you basically watch, and it has like exams that you take on those. You can watch them unlimited number of times. If you're good at learning that way, they're great. Some people don't learn that way, and they need that instructor time, and that's fine too. But so it's not required, but you'll save yourself a lot of time and money if you can just like study on your own. All right, so dirty details of flying. So everybody always wants to know, what is this going to cost me? There is a lot of money involved in flying. There is obviously a difference between like private pilot and light sport. We talked earlier about the difference in hours. So I'm actually going to show you 2 different screens. This one, if you look down at the bottom, it's going to show you 40 hours is required. So that's the FAA requirement for your private pilot. The current average is 70 to 80 hours. So it's just knowing what to expect with your own training. And then with the light sport pilot, 20 is required. The current average right now is 45 to 50. Some things to keep in mind, and again, research, know what you're getting yourself into. If you know, how do I want to say this? When I started training, I had a job where I had a lot of flexibility with my time. So when I started my training, I knew I want to fly 2 to 3 times a week. So obviously, do I have 2 to 3 hours to commit every week? Do I have the money to pay for that? So we did our research. We had money saved ahead of time. So we were prepared. If you're someone that's just like, oh, this sounds fun, I'm going to get started. Well, now it's like, oh man, now I got to get an oil change, and I got to change my tires. You start looking at like, what's priority? Like, well, I can't afford to fly this week, so I'm just not going to. If you're that person, it's going to take you a lot longer to build the skill. You're going to pay a lot more time for the airplane and for the instructor. So when you're thinking about like how many hours is this going to take me, keep that in mind. If you know, because some people, it takes them a couple of years. They can only fly once a week because that's just what they can afford or what their schedule is. So it's probably going to take you, like you're going to be at the higher end and probably closer to 80 hours to get your certificate. Some people have over 100 because, again, if you can only fly once a week and you don't learn, everybody learns at a different pace. And it doesn't make anybody a worse or better pilot, but just kind of knowing for yourself, can I gain the skill? Can I gain the knowledge fast enough? So that's going to kind of help you keep in mind what your final cost is going to be. Same thing with light sport. Just knowing, like, can I commit that much time? Something that you do want to keep in mind with scheduling is, and this is probably some of the best advice we got in talking to other people, is even if you're like, I'm pretty sure I can only afford to commit 1 flight a week, that's fine, book 2, because here in the Midwest, weather is going to play a part. If you only book 1 and then it gets canceled for rain or wind or something like that, and now you've got to wait another week, and now you've gone 2 weeks without flying, you do lose those skills pretty quick. So book 2, that way if one gets canceled, you still have 1 reserved. Doesn't mean you have to keep it. A lot of flight schools, so like with Hoosier, with their system, there are a lot of times where I'd have like several booked because you never know what the weather's going to do. Or something else that can happen is the plane can be down for maintenance because rental aircraft are required to have like 100-hour maintenance checks and oil changes and things like that. So I would book several, and then if it's like, okay, I don't need this extra one this week, I can move it. And there's no charge to do that. And so you could book two, maybe you get that first one, and then like you can move that second one. So you're not booking two with the commitment of like, I have to fly twice. You're just making sure that you get that once in. Same thing if you know you want to fly 2 to 3 times, book 3 to 4, because there's more likely something's going to happen where you're not going to get to fly those days. So keep that in mind. So you'll kind of see the breakdown. And this, as far as the hours here on this breakdown, we just kind of like averaged what's required and what the current average is. So you'll see like 55 hours. And this is one that the EAA provided to us. So this is kind of just like current costs associated. So a lot of flight schools, the average is $120 an hour. Fuel cost is listed. Flight instruction, you'll see that it's a little bit lower just because you don't need as many hours with an instructor as you do with like flying. So that's going to vary. Now, if you're doing like online flight school, that's going to be a lot lower. I think the amount of hours I had for ground school with my actual instructor was like probably around 10. So again, it just depends on how much information you can learn on your own and how much time you might actually need with your instructor. Some instructors might still want you to do some ground lessons with them just so that you can review and they're like, okay, they've got the information. But that's why there's a little bit of variation in the hours there. Miscellaneous supplies is just because like all the things that you have to buy does add up. So you'll see like this breaks down private pilot, you're looking at 11.4 for the investment. Sport pilot, a little bit less, going to be around 75. Now, I want to spend more time on this next slide because one of the differences, and you're not going to see a lot of change in like the overall cost, but here at Hoosier, again, we have no fuel costs, so I didn't have to spend thousands of dollars in fuel. Their rates did just change, so their cheapest airplane that they have right now is a Cessna 150. They have 152 and a 150, and it's $135 an hour. And this one's kind of like at the higher. So this one I just put like 70 hours. So if you're a person that knows it's going to take you more hours, that's kind of like the price that you can expect it to take for private pilot. And then it's got the difference for the light sport. I put the flight instruction hours, again, is based on if you do online school, just need a few hours with your instructor, and then your supplies. When I added up like all my supplies between like my headset and everything else, I was looking at like 1,500. So just wanted to give you kind of like a more accurate description of what it could be. I will say, by the time I was ready for my check ride, I was at like 65 hours. And then we had like some scheduling issues, like between our availability, me and the examiner. I did have to cancel once for weather, and because I wanted to keep my skill up while I was waiting to see him, I didn't keep flying. So by the time I actually did my check ride, I think I was at 72 hours. So I was at that higher end. And I think between all my hours and my examiner fees, I was at like 13,000. So you'll see a lot of information that, like, I know when we went to Oshkosh the first year, everything we saw said that it's going to cost you about $20,000 to get your private pilot. And it can. But me, we obviously want to save as much money as we could. So we knew, let's do this when we've got the money saved, when we've got the time available, so I can keep that cost down. Some people might spend 20 or more if they have to do it over several years because it takes them longer to build this field, that kind of thing. But it doesn't have to be expensive. And then obviously, again, light sport, if you know, like, I don't need to go through the clouds, I don't need to fly commercially, I don't care about flying at night, light sports would be a much cheaper option. So just kind of things to keep in mind for your own mission, so to speak. So when we talk about whether or not it's affordable, if you look at what you're going to pay for like a brand new F-150 or even like a brand new car these days, or some people like, I'm going to buy a motorhome and I'm going to go travel. Getting your pilot certificate is not necessarily expensive in comparison to other things out there. So it's really comes down to like what you're interested in. So some people like to travel in their RV. Some people like to have that nice pickup. Some people want to go out on their pontoon boats. If you're a person that likes aviation and you want to fly, compared to other things that people pay for, getting your pilot certificate isn't necessarily that expensive. So that just kind of breaks down, some of the things that you might spend on different things. The the nice thing about your pilot certificate, obviously, is it doesn't expire. For a private pilot, you do have to do what's called like a review every 2 years, where you just go up with an instructor again and demonstrate that you can still do the things. But the certificate itself doesn't expire, so you have it for life. And then same thing with the airplane, and Blake's going to come up in a minute and talk about airplane costs. But airplanes are not like cars. So like if you go buy like a 10-year car right now, you're probably going to be like, what's wrong with this? How long is it going to last? That kind of thing. Still spend quite a bit of money on it. You can go out and buy like a 60-year-old airplane and it's going to run very well. So when you think about like investment and if it's worth it compared to other things out there, it's definitely doable. We actually had a friend recently. We were talking to him about planes that we wanted to find. We said something about getting, I don't remember which one we were talking about, but it was like at least 60 years old. And he was like, oh, really? It's like, well, yeah. Because with airplanes, they are so regulated with the maintenance that they have to have done and how that's documented that they are usually very well taken care of. So it's nothing to have an airplane that's from like the 40s or the 50s or the 60s. So, all right, Blake, I think this is
So I
you're
got
up.
this off these next few slides off the website, and he does YouTube videos as well. So I just wanted to kind of go over some of the basic entry-level type aircraft that are out there. So we'll start with paramotor because we talked about a little bit about ultralights and whatever. And I got a friend from work that flies paramotors. That's what he got into because it's affordable. He can pack away in his car. He can take it wherever he wants to go. So for a paramotor, purchase price, you know, you can start anywhere from the low end for 10,000s for just a small motor, a decent wing. And then you can go up to the higher end where you have like a trike with the actual seat built into it and all that. Fixed costs. So the fixed costs are your basically fixed yearly costs. So like insurance, if you want to put insurance on it, roughly $300 a year. Annual, which is your annual inspection cost. I mean, he does his own, so roughly $50. So really, and then you don't have to pay for storage because it'll fit in your garage easy. He has a Subaru Crosstrek. He can even fold up his cart and everything, wing, have it in the back of that. Variable cost is just your hourly fuel, you know, reserve. Some people put reserve on their airplanes. It's just like setting aside money in case, like for repairs or maintenance or anything like that. And then the actual maintenance cost is just for like oil changes and spark plug and stuff like that. So for like a paramotor, and this is like an hourly breakdown based on how much you're flying per year. So basically $52 an hour if you're flying like only 25 hours. And the more you fly, the cheaper your hourly rate's gonna be. Your yearly cost will go up the more you fly, but that's mainly because of fuel cost and other consumables that you'll be using. But this kind of just gives a good overview of, because you might purchase it plane or any like paramotor for a certain price, but that's not the whole cost because there's costs for maintenance and other things. So one of our members, he has an Air Coupe, which is a 2-seat vintage. I think his is what, a 46. So it's a neat little plane. It's got top-down windows that fold down, so you can fly the top off. They're very easy to fly. So purchase price for one of these, it's a 2-seat. It's considered light sport as well. It's a vintage light sport. So between $20,000 and $35,000, about the cost of a small Toyota Corolla or something like that.
Less than a brand new gun.
Yeah,
And it's gonna last a lot longer.
it's already lasted a lot longer. So like this, your insurance is gonna be a little bit more because it's it's a full-size airplane. Your insurance is usually broken down. You got your whole coverage and then liability. Hangar is probably going to be the biggest fluctuation. It depends on where you're at. Here, our hangars are what, $170 a month?
Are they actually really cheap?
So, yes. So if you're over like Indy, I'm not sure about Bloomington and where availability is. So that's the biggest fluctuation. Annual for one of these planes, being that it's vintage and it's pretty basic, 4-cylinder engine, you're looking at less than $1,000 for that. And then fuel, it burns what, 5 gallons an hour? So you're like about $20 an hour fuel, $10 for reserve for, engine overhaul and such. And then maintenance is usually pretty low too. So that's just an extra $35 an hour for that. And then here, it breaks it down again. So something like this, you're flying, say you fly 100 hours a year, you're looking about, with all the maintenance costs and everything, you're looking about $79 an hour. So that's 80 versus, one similar plane would be the 150s here for 135. So you're saving about more than $50 an hour on that. So, and then everyone's heard of a Piper Cub. So this is another vintage plane. These ones tend to go a little bit more because they have that Piper Cub, they have that stigma. Everyone wants the yellow Cub. So you can still find them for a decent price, around $25,000. But there's also a lot of them that are marked up, especially ones that have been fully restored to factory original and all that. Being that this is a tail dragger, so tail draggers, your insurance cost is going to be higher because they're more likely to have ground loop, which is, say when you're landing and the back end turns around. You'll learn more about this in your ground school, but they're a little bit harder to land, so insurance costs are a little bit higher on them.
Until you get like enough hours.
Right. Once you get enough hours, then insurance drops. And that's the same with any plane, I think. Annual $1,000. So like these are good 2-seat airplane for people that think, oh, I don't want to have to get my license and then spend $200,000 on an airplane. You don't have to. You can have a plane that is fun to fly. You go to fly to grass strips. We got Pam's Place just to the east here in Cloverdale.
And some planes, this one, like sometimes you can fly without the doors and stuff.
Yeah, that's why people like the Cub, because they fly with the doors open all the time. So, and you're looking about $90 an hour, roughly, or 97. So, it just kind of gives you an idea. And the yearly cost, depending how much you're flying, that's just something to keep in mind. Like, hey, this is how much my maintenance is going to cost me. This is how much I'm going to spend in fuel. That type of thing. So here's a more conventional 4-seater Piper Cherokee, which is a common plane. So these, you can find them from 40, depending on avionics and stuff like that. They could, depending what they're equipped with and like how new the engine is and all that as far as overhaul, they can be up to the higher end range as well. If they get fancy Garmin avionics or anything like that, GPS or autopilot, then they're going to be on the higher end. That one's a little hard to read. But anyway, $1,500 for insurance. Hangar, that's the biggest range, anywhere from $800 to $8,000. If you just want to, say your airport has tie downs outside, Midwest, not really recommended with our weather. But say if you're somewhere where it's nice, you can play like this, you can leave sit out in the ramp, being that it's all metal.
Well, like we said, like our hangars are much cheaper. Well, or is that the annual that is? The hangar cost?
No, the hangar's down here. The $8,000 could be your hangar.
For a month?
For a year.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah. So all these are yearly costs. So annual, roughly $2,000. But yeah, average maintenance, variable cost. A 4-seat plane like this is about 10 gallons an hour. So this is similar to what Rick and Mark have had with their plane. So 100 hours a year, you're looking from $12,000 to $17,000 a year. But most of that's going to be fuel cost.
So the numbers can sound really intimidating, but again, it just comes down to like what you want to do. If you know, like, hey, it's just going to be me, I just want to pay some low passes here and there, you don't need a real expensive plane. If you're like, nope, I'm going to be a family of 4, I want to travel long distance, I need something fast that's going to burn a lot of fuel, those are things you want to consider. So just knowing like what your mission, what your plan is, because there are, the unfortunate thing, we know COVID kind of messed everything up. Ever since COVID, like plane prices have really jumped up. It used to be you could get some pretty decent planes for fairly cheap. Everything is just more expensive now. We have the world, it's still up. But there are still a lot of really good affordable things out there. So it's knowing what you want to do and what you're interested in. So don't let the cost scare you. It's just if you think like if I know for me and Blake, if we think about how much we spend eating out a month, like if you're spending like $500 to $1,000 eating out a month, maybe it's not so bad to spend $400 in fuel in an airplane. You know what I mean? Like if you start thinking about how much money you spend on other things when you compare it to flying, it's not always that much more expensive. So there are things that you can do to save money. So again, research. know what you're getting into, know what your plan is, study as much as you can at home, because even if you're doing all of your, like your ground school with your instructor, there are things that you can do at home to prepare. There's a million YouTube videos out there at your disposal where you can learn. You can also do what we call chair flying. So chair flying is very much where it sounds like you're literally sitting in a chair and you're kind of like picturing like the cockpit in front of you, and you're like kind of practicing like getting it started and looking at all the things that you need to do. You can buy checklists online. So I actually have a few up here. We've got one of the planes I've been flying recently is one of the Piper Warriors. So we've got like a checklist for that. And then these are like the emergency procedures for the Cessna 152, and then just like the regular. So like you can buy these online for pretty cheap, so you can sit at home and you can practice going through like your checklist, so you get all that practice down. The more that you do on your own, at home, the better off you're going to be as far as like saving money. So
one thing that, I don't know if you got this in there, one thing that helps out a lot, and you talk about, you got one help too, is flight simulation.
Yes.
Because it allows you to work through your procedures, go through your checklist, get familiar with your processes. You can be familiar with your maneuvers and like what the step is to set up those maneuvers. Yes, it's not going to feel like the plane itself, you're not going to get that muscle memory feel, but you're going to know what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be able to recognize when you're off, you're not off course, but you deviate from the standards and your speeds and stuff like that. So it's just a way to repetition of steps and the sequences that you need to do while flying.
So I will say,
it also helps with the cross-country planning and stuff like that.
yes. So I will say he flies on the sim for fun. He enjoys it for the most part. I won't say that I enjoy it, but I do use it. When I feel like it's been a while since I've flown, I will get on there, I'll practice some landings, I'll practice like navigating somewhere just to kind of keep my skill up. And it's cheap, I'm doing it at home, and it's also safe. If I wreck not that you want to wreck your sim plane, but if you wreck the plane in the sim, it's a computer, it's not a big deal. Where if you have not flown for a while, you go wreck an actual plane, you're gonna have a little bit more trouble. So it is just a really good way to keep your skill up. I also like to do it because then it makes me go through like the checklist and like practice all the things that you need to remember to do. So that'll save you a lot of money. A lot of flight schools have a simulator. I don't know if the one at Bloomington does. Hoosier has an FAA rated one, which means that it can be counted for hours for like a trip rating and stuff like that. It's like, I think it's $40 an hour. I've not used it, but so like if you have a flight school that has one, take advantage of it, or if you have one at home, use it, it'll help you. Again, fly often. The more that you fly, the more you are going to build that skill, and you won't need as many hours to get your actual certification. Have money prepared, so kind of like think ahead of time. What do you want to do long term? How much can I commit now and have that money ready? There are a lot of people that finance their flight training as an option, but who wants to have a bunch of loans if you don't need to? So if you're in a position in life where you can kind of start saving that money and setting it aside, or at least a good portion of it, that's what get you through. Because like I said earlier, life happens, and if you have to decide, am I going to fly this week or am I going to get tires for my car? You don't want to have to worry about that. Like, you just want to know that you have that flight fund to draw from. Talk about block rates. So here at Hoosier, if you purchase like 10 hours in advance, you get a discount per hour. I don't remember if it's like $5 or $10 an hour, but if you think for like long term, you can save a couple $100 doing that. So definitely look into that, see if that's an option. And then whether you actually purchase like an online ground school, there are so many videos and so many different ways to access information that the more that you study at home, you're just going to build that knowledge that much faster, and it's cheap. So the other question people also want to, if I can talk, also want to ask, how long is this going to take me? It's really up to you. Like, how much time can you commit? Do you have the funds up front? How often can you fly? Do you live in an area where it's raining every other day? Do you live in an area where there's always wind? I know here, I feel like wind tends to be a big factor for us. I feel like most recently, the few times that we've had to cancel a flight was because of the wind. It's the Midwest, it gets windy, it just is what it is. Every plane has like its own like wind ability, what it can handle structurally, that kind of thing. So when you're thinking like, how long is this going to take me? You're going to know yourself as far as like how well you can study, how much time you have to commit, that kind of thing. All those things are going to take come into play. Some people can get theirs done within like 3 months. Some people, this has 18 months, some it's several years. I got mine done in just under 6 months. But again, we started knowing that I was going to apply 2 to 3 times a week, and that's what I did. So just a couple other things to keep in mind. There's no, have you been up in like a 2-seater, like a small plane before? There's nothing like being up in a general aircraft plane. It's really, and I don't know, you guys can kind of chime in if you have any thoughts, but it's hard to compare it to anything else. There's just like a certain amount of fun and peace. It's really, I don't know how to put words to it. Like, it's just an incredible experience to be up there in a plane flying. So it's definitely something that's going to be very rewarding for you. You're going to learn a whole new skill set and knowledge base. So less than 1% of people have a private pilot certificate or have a pilot certificate at all. So you will be kind of like among the rare ones. Not everybody can do it, or not everybody, and that doesn't mean like, I'm not trying to be a like, some people just don't have the time and money to commit, even if they want to. So it's not something that everybody has. There's also a joke among people in aviation about if someone's a pilot, you'll know because they will tell you. And that's pretty accurate. Like, I'm a pilot, and you expect everybody else to have that same enthusiasm, and when they don't, it's like, oh, well, heck with you then. No, we just really love flying. We love being part of the aviation, so it's just a lot of fun. Your learning's never going to end. You're always going to be learning new things about managing the aircraft, flying in different conditions, things like that. There will be struggles. So we talked about like landings. That can be discouraging for a lot of people. One of the things I struggled with actually was I am not mechanically or scientifically inclined. So for me, like learning the systems of the airplane, understanding the engine and the electronics and the just weather stuff, that does not come naturally to me. I had to spend a lot more time on that, so that was frustrating. I knew that was going to be a challenge, so I knew that going ahead of time, so I just, I was prepared for that. But so there's going to be highs and lows. There's going to be things that are like, oh, this was really easy, and there's going to be things like, oh, why is this so hard? We're all different, so just be prepared for that. But it definitely makes it, it's definitely worth it. I think I mentioned this earlier. If you've not looked into the local chapter, consider joining them. You're welcome to join our chapter if you'd like to. Not a requirement, but there's such a knowledge base and experience base that it's definitely worth taking advantage of.
And one note on that is we talked to someone at Tammy's place, the pancake breakfast this last Saturday, and he's based out of the Hendricks area, but he joined a chapter over near Columbus, Ohio, because they had members over in their chapter way over there that were building a plane that he was interested in building, and where his local chapter did not. So you might join a chapter that may be more inclined to what you are doing versus the closest one.
Yeah, and you can always, most chapters have a website, so you can always kind of reach out and say, hey, what kind of activities do you guys do? Or do you have anyone building this? Or kind of determine, is this a chapter that I want to be part of? Definitely, that was a great experience for us. Now, obviously, we joked earlier, less than 2 years, and I'm already the president. I don't know that that's any great part on mine. I think it was an open seat that somebody needed to fill. But being part of a chapter will give you a lot of it. We have so many people that we've been able to talk to, get their experiences, get the knowledge from. And neither one of us come from an aviation family. I have nobody and even distant relatives that are part of aviation in any way. So this was a whole new community for me to join. So it's definitely worth it. So because you're here today, some of the things that you will have benefited to you is once we complete today's event and we get your flight schedule and everything submitted to the EAA, you do get an automatic free 6 months of membership to EAA. So you'll have access to all their materials. You'll get something in the mail giving you your ID number and stuff like that and how to log in and those kind of things. So you'll get that. Another thing is once you take your written exam, EAA will reimburse you for that cost. So I think I paid $120, $130 for the exam for the written, but the price varies a little bit depending on the testing center, but the EAA will reimburse you up to $175. So that's a fee that you get kind of covered as a reimbursement. Another option that you get through the EAA and Sporties is you get a free flight bag if you choose to purchase the Sporties online ground school. So you get a free flight bag. And flight bag prices really fluctuate because there's so many different ones.
60 to 100.
Yeah, so it just kind of, so that can be a nice little, like, if you know you're gonna get sporties, it's like, why not get a free flight bag? And then something else that the EAA sends you is you can get a commemorative like plaque once you actually get your certificate. So keep those things in mind. And then something else that Sporties is doing right now, not a lot of time to make a decision because they're own. So this is like, today is International Learn to Fly Day. That's why we're having this event today. All this week was just learning how to fly, information put on by the EAA, but they partnered, they do a lot with Sporties, which is one of the top, I won't say top, but one of the popular ones out there. So I think through the end of tomorrow, you get a lot of the stuff that we talked about for training, you get $100 off. So you get it for $399. The typical price is $499, but that includes like the cost of the online ground school too. So if you think, well, it costs $250 for the ground school, it's going to cost this much for my EFB, this much for my books, or whatever. It is a good deal if you know that you're going to do it. So that kind of breaks down everything. Pretty much most of the things that I talked about that are required, you're going to get. I'm trying to look to see if there's anything. You also get like a fuel tester. So one of the things that you'll learn to do is like every time you go pre-flight, you have to check your fuel. So you get like the free little fuel sump that you have to use to check that. But I think everything else. Something I didn't talk about that depending on what you, so these are called foggles. So they're, you can imagine what the FU stands for there. Ugly sunglasses. So these are what's used for like instrument training. So like if you pursue your private pilot certificate, you will have to do like 3 hours of instrument training with that. And so you have to wear something like this that basically keeps you from being able to look at the plane. Like you have to rely solely on your instruments. So that's in there too. If you're gonna be a light sport pilot, you won't need those, but those are in this kit. It also has a flight bag. And I think that's it. So don't have a lot of time to make that decision, but definitely a good, it's a good deal. So just wanted to throw that out there. So kind of wrap up again. So know your mission, know like what your interest is, what's your purpose, what do you want to do long term, research the heck out of it. There's a ton of information, whether you're Googling, talking to people like us, reaching out to the local chapter, whatever that is, and then have a plan. So most people that start pursuing their pilot certificate do not finish, but that is because they just jump in without knowing what they're getting into. If you have a plan in place, you've got the money prepared, you've got the time, you can do this. You can make this happen. I did throw in this information just because this is what's local, so here's your aviation's information. Like Blake said, there is a person that comes here to do he flies here and does his, what is he working towards? Do you know?
He does private.
Right, is he working towards like, do you know? Not that it matters. So this is their information and some of the planes that they have available to fly. And again, we'll email these slides to you so you'll have their information if you do want it. So that's an option. Oops, and that's really it. So now we just want to give you a chance to ask any questions you might have. There's a lot of experience and knowledge in this room. You are more than welcome to come up here and like mess with any of this stuff that's up there just to kind of see what it is and what it does. So let's kind of turn it over to you. Have any questions?
One thing I've found hard to, I guess, find information-wise, probably just because no one online at least is asking the exact question. So for me, I'd be interested in probably private pilot, but also tail wheel enforcement. Is it possible to do like while you're doing your private pilot, do like 10 hours worth of that in a tail wheel?
You can do your full training in a tail wheel.
Okay, so you come out of it with your tail wheel.
Yep.
It's harder to find the tail wheel to train it.
That can be tricky. So obviously, like whatever, if you're going to go through like a flight school, know what planes they have to go. So like right now, I know I want to get my tail wheel endorsement. The plane that Hoosier has been out. They've been like kind of like redoing it. They still have
years.
Yes. So I might end up having to go somewhere else because we're looking at having a champ by the end of the year. So I might have to go like mid-year or something. But yes, you can. If you are at a flight school that has a tail wheel plane, you can do all of your training in the tail wheel, come out with your certificate and your tail wheel.
You don't have to do it all, you just have to do something for signed off and that.
Well, that's true, yeah, yeah, you could do like the first, let's say you do the first 20 hours of the tail wheel, get your endorsement, when you're done, you can do the rest of your training in like
I think it's as long as
assessment.
you're signed off to store.
Yeah, the thing with the tail wheel endorsement is there's no set number of hours that you have to have. It's just, if the CFI says, yep, you can manage the plane, they do an endorsement and you're logged with, you're good, so.
That might be the best way to start out with it, get the hard part over.
I mean,
Once you
that's
can do the tail wheel, you're not gonna have any problem with that.
Yes, if you can fly and land a tail wheel, you will not have any other, it makes it, from what I hear, I mean, it makes it better, because they are a little bit more challenging, so you get that skill right off the bat.
You don't think so, Dale?
Huh?
You think the tail wheel's harder, isn't it? It's not?
When that's what you work with.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the thing,
When
yeah,
you're
so-
old enough, that's all the work available.
Yes, I mean, yeah, well, planes have changed, yeah, so it used to be like everything was a tail wheel, you know, until they weren't, so. But we've talked about, like, if we get a champ, like, he's gonna do all this training in the champ potentially, and then he's got his tail wheel because he's training in the tail wheel. So, yes, that is a great question.
Yeah, as a tail wheel pilot, I mean, it just shows up your mistakes a lot. You can screw up in a tricycle gear, and the plane is much more forgiving. If you screw up on your landing in a tail wheel, it's gonna tell you that pretty quickly.
Yes, yes, and so that's
You
why
should be
they
looking
are
backwards.
that's why they make you a better pilot, because you have to have that much, your skill has to be that much better, so that is a great question. Any others?
That was honestly really my main one. It's a lot of great information. I had other questions, but then just kind of answered them in it, so.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we're always available to reach out to. We have a Facebook page, we have a website, we give you a folder full of information. We do want to get you scheduled with the pilot old rig, so we've got a few pilots in here, so Rick and Tom are looking primarily at you two. So Rick has an RV12. No, yeah, RV12. So just kind of standard tricycle. Tom has a tail wheel frame. So just kind of up to you and like with scheduling, like what your guys' availability is. We'll definitely want to get you scheduled so that you know when to come back and get that flight experience. It'll be free. It's a good opportunity to get up in the air. A lot of people get up in the air like, oh, I need a little air sick. Some people get up there like, oh, I hate this. Some people are like, oh, I love this. I'm doing this now.
Well, that's another thing to touch on. So talk about the air sickness, because some people will get air sickness, but some people won't through.
Yeah, so some people like it's just kind of building up your tolerance. So some people can get up there, they get queasy at first, and it takes them a few flights to get used to it, and it's not a big deal. So if you go out there like, oh, I don't feel so good, don't let that make you feel like you can't get back on the plane. You can't work through it. There's obviously medicine out there. I'm not one that even gets like seasick or like plane sick or anything like that, but there have been a couple times where it's been really and bumpy enough that I did kind of come home, I feel like, oh, I don't feel so good. It's part of it, but it's not like a be all end all kind of thing. So really, Rick, if you want to come